Next up, we have a pretty fun prospect in my mind, evaluation-wise, by the way of Alijah Vera-Tucker, the offensive tackle slash guard out of USC. Obviously, as we kind of get into just his general measurables as well as sort of his pro day numbers, played guard and tackle, right? Played guard in 2019, played tackle in 2020, which, is good versatility, obviously. The question then is just where does he project better? 6'4", 315, he was listed at, as pro day was 6'4", 308, right? So a little bit lighter, not a huge deal there. The only thing I would say is that you would think he would maybe want to be lighter to play on the edge than on the interior. But, it is what it is. He can most certainly gain that weight back. Otherwise, 36 reps on bench, 225. That's really impressive, at least in my eyes. A 32-inch vert. I don't know if he's trying to dunk anytime soon, but that's impressive. 5'1", 40-yard dash, right? Like, you're sort of seeing the physical tools laid into place with a guy like Tucker. And I think that is why he's such a fun evaluation, because some people have some dissenting opinions, guard or tackle. Well, I really do think at the end of the day, he could really kind of play both, right? I think that at varying levels, sure, but I think that he's a guy that's pretty balanced in terms of both phases, pass blocker as well as run blocker. I thought that, any sort of nitpicky concerns that I necessarily had for him on the edge were kind of solved by going inside, right? And I don't think that things were necessarily 100% perfect there, but I do think he projects really well, as you obviously see with the 81.25. In pass pro, did a very solid job. You saw the strength certainly play a factor, right? I think you saw that foot quickness that on the edge was sometimes a little bit shaky. I thought you saw that certainly become one of his strengths on the inside, right? And then in terms of run blocking, a question obviously is how are you going to be, whether it's versus a 260-pound DN versus a 300-plus pound defensive tackle. And I actually thought he looked really solid. He was able to better get in position to make the blocks in terms of, okay, it's a reach block. The guy's a gap removed. I got to, kind of do a bucket step, crossover maybe, and then try and get my hand through the sternum and my helmet to the other side of his body to cut off that flow. Did a good job in that regard, right? In terms of, away from the line of scrimmage, I thought he looked very solid as well in terms of, say, his ability to trap block guys, wrap up the hole, to climb to the second level as a backside guy. I just felt like, the more film you watch, particularly at guard in 2019, I thought he looked increasingly more solid. Not that the 2020 film was bad by any means. There were some question marks there. I would say punch timing, by example, on the edge, I thought was something that kind of would mess him up in certain instances. Well, on the inside, that's sort of neutralized because almost immediately as soon as the ball snap, you're throwing, right? In terms of hand placement, things are just much more complex on the edge. You have to read, is the guy going to be a speed rusher and give me that near shoulder? Is he going to try and be a power rusher and potentially give me his chest? Or is he going to go for, say a swim move or something and give me his kind of rib cage? On the inside, that's not really as much of a concern, right? Guys are lined up generally head up, face up on you, slightly removed. You can pretty much always bet that their chest is going to be in the same spot. And I think that with that being said, a lot of those sort of minor concerns that I had with him at tackle were sort of answered at guard. Otherwise, I thought his balance and leverage was a little bit shaky from time to time, in all honesty. I think that sort of with that power and strength, you find a guy that wants to put guys down and really drive guys off the ball frequently, which obviously that's good, but sometimes I think he can get a little bit just overzealous in terms of sort of lunging forward and losing that good posture and good solid base, and then as a result kind of fall off of his blocks. But no, otherwise I think really solid player. Physicality and finishing, as I said, that's very solid. IQ and awareness, the grade could maybe be a little bit higher, but I did have to take into account some of those tackle games that I saw in which he looked a little bit more out of his element than he did at guard. Not saying that he couldn't play tackle. I think that would impact his grade a good bit, right? I would say he's probably more, if you were drafting solely as a tackle, he's a little bit more into that second round discussion for me. But as a guard, at that size, at that strength, at that mobility, sort of foot quickness, put it all together, I think you're looking at a really solid prospect here out of Alijah Vera-Tucker. And, you put that on the big board and he's right there in that first round discussion, right? Obviously doesn't quite get the benefit of the larger position premium at offensive tackle, being that I project him as a guard. So you'll see he has a higher raw grade than Darisaw, but overall has a lower final grade. I think at that point, it's sort of a preference in terms of if you're a bad team with just a bunch of holes on your O-line And, maybe in the next coming years, you just want to be able to play the 5 best guys, or you want to keep your options open in terms of if we're picking at the top of next year and there's a great tackle, we want a guy who can play at guard, but also if, the next Quentin Nelson's in next year's draft, maybe we want a guy who can move out to tackle. If you're going to value that versatility a little bit more, I would maybe go towards Alijah Vera-Tucker. Whereas if you're more so just looking for a guy to instantly step into an already solid offensive line situation, I would argue that maybe Darisaw would be the better pick in that regard. But overall, I think a very solid guy. I think I had him just slightly ahead of Jalen Mayfield for a similar reason. I just think that, a lot of people think Mayfield should go to guard. Well, luckily, we've already seen Vera-Tucker play at guard, and I thought in 2019 he played pretty freaking well. Then you take those various things that you learned from the outside, bring them back inside, and as somebody who's had to make that transition before back in college a little bit, I kind of got thrown on the spot where one practice in the middle of camp, our coach came up to me and we were down to 7 offensive linemen, right, from like 15 down to 7 or 8, and it was like, yeah, I know you're right tackle, but can you play our 1 and 2 guard today, left guard? And it's like, okay, and it's something when you've spent 4 years trying to learn the playbook from one perspective, and then you got to, 14 minutes before practice, adjust to it from another spot. But I think that Vera-Tucker, you've seen that ability to handle those things, right? Obviously, he had an off season; he didn't just have a couple minutes, but I think he played well at both spots, better at one than the other. That's why I project him there. But overall, a really solid prospect that I wouldn't hate if my team took a chance on in sort of that 20s, maybe late teens to into the 20s. I would feel really solid. Otherwise, if we're going higher than that, kind of expecting him to be the next Zach Martin, I would be a little bit hesitant. I just don't think that he flat out dominated as much as, say, a guy like Martin did. And you could say the same thing about Quentin, obviously. I don't think he's in that discussion. But I do think just overall, at the end of the day, a really solid guy who's going to win a lot more reps than he loses. And for a variety of reasons, right? Whether it's his footwork, his hands, his power and strength. I just think that there's too many tools that he has in his tool belt to really not make it on your own line, right? And if you see a better guard come along, you try and kick him outside. If you see a better tackle, kick him back inside. I just think there's a lot of play there with Vera-Tucker. That's why I have him as my 4th highest O lineman to this point. And like I said, depending on your situation, you can most certainly make a case for number 3. So that being said, if you guys did enjoy the video, as always, make sure you click that like button. Make sure you leave a comment. Tell me, what are your thoughts? If you're coming back in a month from now after the draft and your team drafted Vera-Tucker, tell me, where did you guys get him? Was it in that mid-teens where you maybe feel a little less confident? Or is it into the 20s, potentially even into the 2nd round? I kind of doubt that based on now after reading up on some of the news and rumors with him. It seems like he's almost a lock at this point for round 1. But, hey, you never know what could happen in that regard. If you get him into round 2, I think that you very well might have just stole the best guard in this class and potentially a pretty good tackle if you need him to play there as well. So with that being said, as always, I'm mic'd up. Now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys.